Okay, well, thank you very much for having me. It's a great honor to be in front of the elite of the French, at least, if not Europe. I went to a place in England, they thought they're building the elite of Europe, but they were confused. It's clearly you. Et il faudrait bien sûr parler français, mais la raison qu'on ne parle pas français, c'est pourquoi? C'est parce que les Anglais étaient les premiers d'avoir découvert hein? Steam engine, c'est quoi? Steam engine is what in French?
Machine à vapeur.
Machine à vapeur. Donc la machine à vapeur a causé évidemment d'être sous contrôle des Anglais. Ils n'ont pas anglais jusqu'à ce moment-là. Et je vous invite de assurer que le futur sera encore une fois français, ou bien allemand, ou bien européen, non seulement anglais. As an American by birth, forgive me that I watch Star Wars. And as a good Jedi Knight, I would wish the other Jedi Knights, may the Force be with you. Now the good news is, for you guys, when I started about 20, 30 years ago to think about sustainable investments, I really needed some luck. You guys in a different position, the Force is with you. You don't have to tack against the wind, you have full wind behind you. And the only thing you have to worry about is you don't let cynical bastards fool you, right? You all know to use ChatGPT, but you all know never to trust it, but to check it. Check the facts in a different language, you get a different result. Check the facts and you will see the market force is with you. Who do I mean with you? I like to call with you what President Theodor Heuss of Germany calls the European values. The European values, he says, are built on 3 mounts. 3 hills would be exaggerated. The first one is Golgotha, the mount of the crossing of Jesus outside of Jerusalem. It's the idea of loving thy neighbor. If I give you 10 euros to buy her something, and I give you 10 euros to buy something to yourself, in 99% of the cases, the guy that helps to help someone else is happier. The truth is, we actually care about other people. And it's not true that we like killing other people, or that we are racist, or bigots, or fascists, or anything of that sort. We really are caring individuals. So love thy neighbor is the first thing that, to my mind, defines Europe, or in fact, most human beings. It just happens to be a European quote. And, whenever I'm faced with business decisions, for example, I have a defaulting investor in my fund, he's lying on the floor bleeding. Do I kick him in the side and default him and take the money? Or do I say, I better take care of him? My choice is always to take care of him. If I have the choice to do a quick deal, but I pay someone a bribe, I try to be a little bit corrupt or something, I come to the conclusion, you can't be a little bit corrupt, you can't be a little bit pregnant, either you are or you are not, right? And then the decision for me is always clean business. And I worked in many places full of very, very many opportunities to earn money quickly, and I refused and only got to be a billionaire once and just about to get back again. So, but we'll try hard. So I like doing honest stuff. We're here in an institution built by Charles de Gaulle, and I truly am inspired by the French. We owe the French our legal system. We owe the French the freedom, the idea of freedom and democracy, all of it. Yeah. Many of the greatest things were French. When I went to French school, I was a bit scared, I have to say. It was so strict and so Germanic. I thought, shit, what are they doing? Don't copy the Germans, okay? Keep being open-minded. So I think that, also there are 3 mounts. First mount, Golgotha, love thy neighbor. Second mount, Acropolis for democracy. And the third mount, the Capitol in Rome. Of course, you're from Florence, more important than Rome, for the rule of law, which are all the things that I think the force is now behind us. If you look at the interest rate that Trump has to pay and Germany pays, we pay half as much. If you look at renewable energies, the force is truly with us. And what the renewable energies give us, what the circular economy give us, is energy independence. We know that if the Russians turn off the gas, or the Americans no longer ship LNG, we're dependent. We don't have to be dependent anymore, we'd be fully independent. We can have our own energy, wind, solar, batteries, stump ports, pump storage, green hydrogen, whatever we want. We can have our own food, our own tech, and lead the world, and speak our own languages. I also think that for the first time in my life, everything is really aligned. The first agenda item at Rammstein, support group for Ukraine, should not be how many tanks have you sent, but what do you think? What should be the first question? How much money did you send to Putin? And how do we send money to Putin? Burning gas, burning oil, burning coal. Paying more money than we would for wind, solar and batteries. A coal power plant in Germany costs 12 cents per kilowatt hour. Replacing that with wind, solar batteries costs us 4 cents per kilowatt hour. We save money and we stop funding Putin. We stop funding the Iranians who are suppressing women in Iran. We stop funding the Saudis. We bring the prices down. It changes the world for the better. So women's rights, climate change, peace, all aligned with the same policies. And the key policy is one that you probably learned in kindergarten or somewhere. You should leave the campground more pretty than it is. It was when you came there. The golden rule, don't do to others that you don't want to do them to you. People should pay for the externalities they cause. That's the first principle. It's part of our constitution, the European Union. Those that cause dirt should pay for it. And the mistake in our economic system today is not capitalism per se, but what I call cowboy capitalism, a capitalistic system where certain things are not priced. I have a father who was a member of the Committee of Wise Men of Germany, a director of the largest bank of the world, a very wealthy man. Still, 3 times a week he travels by bike to our public pool, pays €1.50 for the swimming, and then takes a hot shower. Do you know why? Because as a child he learned that's where the shower is for free. So he's taking a free hot shower 3 times a week in the public pool. And if you give German the chance to get free beer, what do? They drink beer all day. And what do? We give people the chance to burn CO2 at no cost to society. And guess what? No economic system can function if you don't put a price on the externality that's cost. And the good news is that even though it seems unbelievable today, I believe the world is changing rapidly to one where externalities will be fully priced. Before the big crisis in the 1920s, the great financial recession, there was no international accounting standard. I could have the same business as you, and you'd report a loss, I'd report a profit. It was considered an insult to have one standard of reporting. And similarly, I believe, and Robert, the G20 leader for the impact investing task force, believes there's no way we'll have accounting standards without accounting for the externalities going forward. And once you include the externalities at the cost to society, I think capitalism can survive. I happen to have written my master's thesis on East German economics and at Russian economics prior to the market reforms. I can't recommend socialism. I can't recommend fixed prices. I can't recommend forbidding people what to do. I believe in free markets, but we have to price things properly. And finally, I'm here in France to invite all of you, or all of Europeans and citizens of the world, to join as children of this fatherland, or motherland, or Mother Earth. As you know, the anthem of Europe is the Ode to Joy by Beethoven, which my daughter is going to re-sentence to say, may all sisters of the world unite. I think the day of glory has really arrived. I come from the Rhine. We have lots of castles. I always dreamed of being a knight to save the princess from the castle. I think you really have a chance today to change this world and to win an impossible battle. The tyrants of this world are really funding fascists in France, in Germany, in the UK, in America, to stop an end to the freedom that the French first fought for. And so I think this is a great time to move forward, and I'm very pleased to try to recruit you for this glorious mission. Now, I come from Berlin. This was about half an hour before these people went over the wall. Why do I share this wall with you? Because unfortunately, the reality we live in is going to be a very, very sad one. Now, the next, let's say, 5 minutes are going to be sad and negative, and you shouldn't do this when you speak about what we want to achieve, which is a global booming economy, because we capture opportunities of climate economics. But it's still important to look at the reality in the eye. We have made a major mistake in assessing the feed-through of increased CO2 emissions to temperature. In fact, the rate of temperature increase has doubled twice in the last 2 decades. We are already at 2.4 degrees. We're almost certainly at 3 degrees higher temperatures globally. This almost guarantees not 1 or 2 or 5 million Syrian refugees or 8 million Ukrainian refugees. This guarantees 1 billion refugees. And being German and having lived at this wall, I can tell you this wall holds no one unless there's an order to shoot. And I was invited by Russians to read the memoirs of Paulus in Stalingrad. The memoirs of Paulus, the general who fought at Stalingrad to capture Moscow, was to educate future German generals how to defeat these Russians. And one of the things he said that the toughest SS fascist machine gun operator could go through 100 Russians running at him naked and getting killed. And a second wave and killing them all. And a third wave. But by the 5th wave, not the biggest fascist could kill other humans anymore. So even if we build the tallest wall around Europe, we're not going to stop the 1 billion refugees. The only way to stop this is to invest in climate solutions now and to avoid the slaughter and terror that's headed for us. Now, he's a fan of mine because this chap, Mr. Francis, and this is myself, I got a job at his 80th birthday to become a driver of the Pope. So, how do you become the driver of a Pope? I really didn't have a clue either, but I can give you, I was asked to share some of my life story, how to get here. I was born to Fulbright students in America. There was World War I, following which the Versailles Conference, which took 9 months without involvement of the Germans to decide how Europe should be split up. And then there was World War II, where Mr. Marshall and Mr. Fulbright said, if you defeat someone, you lend them a hand, you give them support, you invite their children to come study in our country, and so I was born in America. Home of the free, I thought, but today I come to you from the home of the free of Berlin, while America is no longer home of the free. I was very lucky to benefit from the Giscard d'Estaing Schmidt student exchange. When I was 12 years old, I met a wonderful girl called Maïté, and that's how I learned French, aside from the fact that my mother is half French, so it doesn't quite count. I studied in Princeton, I studied at Brown, I studied at Oxford, and when I was 23, I was reminded by my grandfather that he had been in the Caucasus Mountains, and a woman with a hijab, a cover of her face, took him into her hut, and he thought that she would kill him in World War II, but she undressed him, washed him, fed him, and told him, when my son comes to Berlin, I want your mother to take care of my son as I took care of you. And when my grandfather was lying outside St. Petersburg, a city that was surrounded by the Germans and people were starving to death, they were eating each other to survive, he met a Russian in a ditch, face to face. They looked each other in the eyes and they didn't shoot. So when the wall came down in '89, I thought, let's see what I can do to pay back some of the 33 million Russians that had been killed by Germans, aside from 6 million Jews and probably 1 million gypsies. Then I went to Russia to try to help Russia become a free market economy and a democracy. I met some of the most amazing people of the world, truly. I met Rüdiger Dornbusch, who was like the macroeconomics god, Stanley Fischer, who became my friend and mentor, head of the Israeli Central Bank, head of the IMF, head of Citibank. Jeffrey Sachs was my first boss. So we had a situation where some of the smartest people in the world came together to create peace in the world and to unite Europe from Kamchatka to Tenerife. That's what I spent 12 years of my life doing. As you see today, not very successful. But as I hope you learn here, the definition of an entrepreneur is not to fall, but to get up quickly. So I believe that through climate change today, we can hopefully return Russia and Europe onto a path of peace as well. Speeding up, in Oxford I was cutting potatoes to pay for my studies, and a very attractive young lady came up to me on a rainy day and said, would you like to support Greenpeace? You can either pay £10 a month or 1% of your income. And being a good mathematician by training, I said, much cheaper to pay 1% of my income. Erarum humanum est, as the Latin taught us. I went on to advise the Russian government. The Russians invited me to become Deputy Minister of Finance as a German. Imagine having a country kill 33 million of your kin and then inviting them to become. Imagine a German in the Ministry of Finance of France or a German in the Ministry of Finance of America. So that's how open they were. I then moved on and decided I didn't want to become Deputy Minister of Finance of Russia because I wanted to rather do that in Europe or in Germany. And instead I helped build a business of Deutsche Bank in Eastern Europe. And I had a professor at Oxford called Merlis. He invented incentive theory. And that's the key secret I would like to pass with you. If you want to get stinking rich very, very fast, the next 3 seconds are worthwhile. So he always said it's always good to have a deal where you believe in something the other side doesn't believe in and you agree on profit sharing. So I met the chairman of Deutsche Bank and I said, would you like to grow your business in Eastern Europe? He said, yes. How old are you? 27, okay. And what we'd like to do, well, I'll do debt capital markets origination. I said, okay, go ahead. In Germany, the cost of a bond is like 0.1%, and maybe I'll do a 100 million bond, and maybe I'll get like 100,000 bonus or so, that'll be fine. Or a third of that, 30,000. As it turned out, with this deal, I then was able to raise 8 billion euros. Commissions were 2%. After 9 months, we had earned $160 million or euros, and I was owed 53 million euros. I was getting almost 28. Time to retire. I was having a good time. I thought, working life is tough. This is my first real job, Unfortunately, the bank forgot to pay me. So then I was reminded of Bertolt Brecht, who's a German communist writer, and he wrote that to rob a bank is nothing. A real professional does what? Opens the bank. Okay. Not very polite to banks. They are very serious banks. Banks are very important to collect assets and to put them into profitable projects. But some bankers, in this case, without very little moral standards, one particularly nasty American in that case, he was asked often, would you sell your grandmother for a nickel? What do you think his response was?
Yeah.
No. What's the exchange rate? So he was someone who forgot to pay me. And not just me, but 140 people that worked very, very hard to raise 8 billion euros. And that put me in a very different position because now I was, I had thought there's Herrgott, God himself, then there's a head of German bank, Deutsche Bank, and how a German bank could open on a contract was completely unfeasible, ununderstandable for me. I was totally shocked. The people I needed as witnesses to say I did do the business had disappeared because they were employed by Deutsche Bank, and I was completely alone in the world. But the mother, who was a lion, she was a national hockey team player, brought up 4 children, and as a woman tried to be successful in Germany, kept on getting knocked down by men all the time until she went to Göteborg, Sweden, where they respect women more, and she ran a big institute. She said, I've got a good Jewish friend. If you're doing a David against Goliath battle, hire a small Jewish law firm. Indeed, no big law firm wanted to represent me. And the small law firm, Mishkon Dereya, then said, okay, we go get them. And we started suing Deutsche Bank. So here I was a student out of university with no salary paid to me, suing Deutsche Bank, and they sent me an invoice after the first month. My legal fees, Deutsche Bank, is $500,000. You continue doing this, by the end of the year, my legal fees, Deutsche Bank, will be $6 million. By the way, you owe us this money if you lose this lawsuit. And then they came up with this huge story how I was a complete fake, how I was, whoring around, bribing around, stealing, crooking, and so forth while I was in Russia, which was the hobby of most foreigners in Russia at the time, I have to say. Not most, but many. I didn't happen to do that because I had the story of my grandfather who was lying in a battle with his Russian, and they came out as friends, so I thought I behaved myself decently. And so Deutsche Bank went through all of my life, everything I ever did. And the worst thing they found is that at Harvard Square, my mother had put me into a communist kindergarten and put me on an anti-Vietnam War tank demonstration. It was really horrible. And the next worst thing was that I founded a ballroom dancing school at Brown University. And not only did I join the American ballroom dancing team, but I was also teaching the lesbian, gay, bisexual student association. So Deutsche Bank, in their wisdom, thought that it was a good argument to an English court to say, you can't trust the guy because you don't even know what his sexual orientation is because he also taught gay people how to dance. And the English guy said, what? it's like, that's the best you can do? Right, we have a thing in England called summary judgment. This is so stupid. Here's 160 million euros he owned. Here's your contract. You should wire the money. Of course, I didn't want to do it. Kept on fighting, and finally, combining the threat of public embarrassment with my claim, we decided to become friends for an undisclosed amount of money, which I can't share with you, which I then shared with my 143 colleagues. I became financially independent. I was getting old at that age, 28. And I was asked, what do I do next? And I met a Nobel Prize winner, and he said, well, you can bring Burger King. I used to do physics, math, economics, finance to Moscow, or you could do something useful with your life. There are, out of, at the time, I think 7 billion people, 3 billion people without access to clean water or electricity. You know, these women, mainly women who care about children, unfortunately still, don't know how to wash their children. You can help them by making solar energy much cheaper than it is today. And I said, that's interesting, but totally impossible. And there's a slide you may have seen before we'll get to. We invested in solar for the first time in 2000, and the prices, as you know, have collapsed terribly. And we are now in a completely new world where, never mind what Trump says, never mind what anyone says, in the last 6 months, Pakistan has increased its power capacity by 50% without a penny of government intervention, all market force driven. People looking it up at the internet, how to install a solar panel, doing it, and the world, the force is now behind us. Getting a bit long, my story, but here we are. Anyway, so I ended up with a lot of money. This little lady from Oxford called me and said, remember that 1% of your income? And all of a sudden you had the biggest donor of Greenpeace in front of you, and I was in the meantime investing my money, and I invested in oil, gas, and coal, as you do. And I was doing good with one hand of my charitable giving and causing damage with the other side of my activities. And then someone came to me and said, you're inconsistent. You're causing more damage than you're doing good with your charity. You're paying for people to climb smokestacks and to demonstrate while you're investing, giving capital to these companies. And my wife then took me to the north of Russia in a Greenpeace exhibition, where a river about 10 times as wide as the Seine was covered in crude oil, this thick of crude oil on top of the river. And this wasn't once. This had been happening every year for 30 years already. Every winter, everything freezes. In the summer or the spring, it melts, and this crude oil just washes into the rivers. And I said, okay, that's cool. I met the local fishermen who were digging up the oil and selling it to Lukoil. They invited us to come along, and after half an hour I was throwing up because it's poisonous, oil and gas and coal and gasoline. They then took us to the cancer hospital, and in the cancer hospital there was 100 times higher cancer rate than anywhere else. I don't know if you had the chance of seeing someone die of cancer. I did at a young age, and it became very clear that's really not cool. But then they took me to the embryo collection, and there were embryos with like 6 fingers and an embryo with 2 heads, and I thought I was sold. Do I really want to pay 1 cent less for gasoline here in Paris, but I have people dying of cancer somewhere else? Or do I want to drive a combustion engine car, but I know I'm destroying the future of my children and my grandchildren? I said no. And so we decided to no longer invest in fossil fuels and to invest in climate solutions. And what happened was, when I was at Brown University, we were the first university to divest from apartheid South Africa. So that was 70% of the index. Mercedes, Peugeot, BMW, everybody was doing business with South Africa. My university decided to divest, and Desmond Tutu came to our university and gave me my diploma and said, you freed Nelson Mandela. All the talking was nice, all the live concerts were nice, but money drives the world. You started, you freed Nelson Mandela. And I'm now doing every morning what Nelson Mandela did for 27 years in prison, 20 minutes of high impact training, 20 minutes of gratitude, 20 minutes of learning, before they took him at 6 in the morning to break him and make him angry and destroy him. When he was freed after 27 years, Nelson Mandela was asked, do you want to lift out of the gate? He said, I don't think so. I may need these steps myself. And every step he took, he said, I took one of the bricks of grudges, one of the bricks of anger that was pulling me down, and I forgave the guys. And one of the first things he did when he was president of South Africa, he invited his prison guard for lunch. And the prison guard kept on shaking, and finally, after the dinner was over, his security asked him, why was he so nervous? Well, this was the guy that had tortured him, that when he begged for water, he pissed at him, they beat him, and he forgave him. And he said, if I had not forgiven them, I would still be in shackles today. So this wise man had walked out of this prison, and Desmond Tutu told us, with this action we took, we actually freed him. That made me feel quite cool. So 30 years later, I'm just back from my trip to the north of Russia. I called Desmond Tutu and said, would you like to be the champion of our movement? The divest, invest movement, not divest from apartheid, but divest from fossil fuels and invest in climate solutions. I said, yes, this is the human rights issue of our time. The person who will die first, because climate change is the person that didn't cause it. And my rooftop pool, my electric cars, my flight here is what causes climate change. 1% of the population in the world causes more CO2 emissions than 50% of the poorest. So he joined us. We had €10 million commitment when we started. We got Leonardo DiCaprio, we got the Rockefeller family, the Sainsbury family, the Renault family, many other families to join us. And we thought, you should do this. You should divest from fossil fuels for moral reasons. And people were like, yeah, good idea, good idea. But it really didn't take off. And then Paris came up 10 years ago, the Paris conference, COP, which you learned about earlier today. And at the Paris COP, the head of the Paris COP, a year before, we were at 50 billion commitments. 50 billion had committed to divest from fossil fuels for moral reasons. And we thought, how much can we do by COP in Paris? We thought, okay, let's be really, really aggressive. We go for 150 billion. 150 billion, that's a lot of money. We took a breath and said, yes, we'll do that. But then, happily, United Arab Emirates, DEWA, Dubai Electricity and Water Authority, built a solar power plant. And for the first time in history, I'll translate to current prices, about 2 cents per kilowatt hour, they asked the question, when will I be sorry to have built this power plant? At what price of oil can we compete? And it turned out it was $5 per barrel. So if the oil price was $5 per barrel, you could make electricity via diesel generator that was cheaper than this solar power plant. And the barrel price was about $50 or $100 at the time already. So it was clear that solar energy was 20 times cheaper than a diesel generator. All of the islands of the world in terms of physical islands, but more importantly, the whole world covered with the 2 billion people that are also in villages, which are not physical islands, but electrical islands, all of them are powered at 50 cents per kilowatt hour. So now you have a technology that makes this thing at 2 cents per kilowatt hour. And we said, wow. And when they published the $5 price, what do you think Shell and BP and Total did? They sued the National Bank of United Arab Emirates for slander and lies and mistakes. Because if true, how could you go to Russia and drill for $30 a barrel? How could you go to the North Sea and drill for 60? How could you go to Canada and drill for $150 a barrel? It makes no sense. It makes no economic sense. And then we worked out the numbers and figured out, hold on a second, if it's true that they're no longer competitive and people are investing billions and billions and billions every year in new oil, gas and coal, what would be the result? The result will be so-called stranded assets. A stranded asset is like a whale that washes ashore and can no longer be used because it's dead. Similarly, you have an oil well that's no longer be used because it's no longer competitive. And the total write-offs are $23 trillion that are heading our way. $5 trillion caused the global financial crisis in 2008 in mortgage-backed securities. The fossil fuel write-offs are 5 times bigger than the financial crisis 2008. So if you're hoping to inherit any money from your parents, look at their portfolio. If there's fossil fuels in there, they're likely to be worth nothing. So we built this movement, Divest Invest. We became impact investors. We decided only to invest with positive impact on the environment. And then the Pope came out and wrote Laudato Si, care about your common home. and invited us to not only the impact investors, but with Laudato Si investors. And after he told us what to do, we asked him, and what do you do? And by the way, this is one of the most modest men I ever met, and he humbles me until this day. He sleeps in a little Santa Marta home, in a little bed, has breakfast with our guests. But when questions, he had to admit that he was driving a Ford Focus. So in my wisdom, I thought, wouldn't it be nice I would give him an electric car for his birthday? The 80th birthday was coming up. And I, in my wisdom, took my Tesla, drove it down, and Cardinal Turton says, "You idiot." I said, "What?" This guy's called Francisco, guy who cares about the poor, who's modestly. He can't drive a €150,000 car. I said, shit. And so we got him a Nissan Leaf, which is this car here. And I got to drive him. I don't know, I think it will take us probably too long to tell this wonderful driving story. If you want to hear the driving story, making fun of the Swiss a little bit. Any Swiss here? No, a little bit Swiss. Okay. Okay. So this is the picture from when I drive the Pope. I gave the Pope his car, his key, and I said, "Can you please drive?" He said, "No, I don't drive." So, "Well, why don't you drive me?" So I drive up the hill in the Vatican and drive down the hill, and the Swiss guard says, "Who checked this car?" No, keiner hat das gecheckt. Nobody checked that car. I said, "Shit." I said, "Oh." Pope out of view, Where's the Pope? Went up the hill, went down the hill, and then they have this rectangular square at the bottom. And as we come down, the Pope says to me, "When I was in America, I learned this saying, put the pedal to the metal." I said, "What does that mean?" Yeah, like, really, I hear they accelerate really well, these electric cars. So, okay. What would you like me to do? "I'd like you to stop, please, and then see how fast it goes." I happen to be at the short end of the square. Swiss guard says, "Pope is standing still, Pope is standing still." So then I hit the gas, not the gas, the electric accelerator. And of course, as you may know, the new Tesla goes from 0 to 100 in 1.9 seconds, and this one doesn't go quite as fast, but it goes fast. And so we have the Swiss guard saying, "Pope is heading for the wall, Pope is heading for the wall." Took a break and took him home. That was my day as driver of the Pope. So that's how you become a pilot of the Pope. I've summarized it in the next slide, so I think we can skip that. But here's the Pope's car. The amazing thing about the Pope's car, I can give it to you for free today. Because the electric car battery I can use to stabilize the grid and earn €3,000 a year, make €1,000 profit, and so forth. Let's see what else we have here. This is how to become the Pope's driver in all detail. I think I've told you the whole story. I can move on. Welcome to Paris, totally flooded. This is Europe, totally flooded. London, totally flooded. My hometown, Berlin, totally flooded. Florence becoming a beach city, we figured out. Venice, unfortunately, gone. Most of Nantes gone. This is not any fantasy. You can look it up at floodnet.net. This is locked in, unfortunately, more or less. So the Greenland ice, do you know what happens to an ice when an iceberg melts? When ice melts, what happens to the sea levels? It goes what?
Rise.
Iceberg melts.
Sea levels rise, like they go up.
Yeah, they should. If the iceberg is on land and it flows into the sea, they would. But iceberg on water, if it melts, actually it goes down because ice is bigger. But in Greenland, you sit on land. So any ice that comes from the glaciers or on land and goes into the sea lifts the sea level. So this is the chart that really impressed me. It got me to change my mind. I have a friend who travels to the Antarctica. So on Greenland, you have an ice cap 3,000 meters high. Its top was in cold air. It's now melted so much that it's now in warm air. And even if we stop climate change today, it will continue to melt, and it's done. And that 7-meter higher sea level is guaranteed. So you don't have to worry about whether that's absolutely guaranteed. So Miami, any coastal cities, gone. So you have 1 billion refugees guaranteed. Question is the speed. I'm a trained economist. I'll tell you a fact or a date, never the two. But the risk is we have exponential speed in all of these mechanisms now. Then you have 60 meters from Antarctica. If the Antarctic ice melts off, you get another 60 meters. And that's what my long-term family home is, a farm, self-sustaining, 100 meters above sea level, because everything below is very, very unsafe. Then you've heard already about the planetary boundaries today, so I'll skip those. This is what defines me, what I do. We want to do everything we do with positive impact on climate within planetary boundaries. And now we quickly turn to good news, and I'll stop and have you ask me questions, hopefully. This is a key institution, Lazare Frères, that have looked at the cost of solar on rooftops. That's already wrong. Pakistanis are here now. Solar utility PV, as we said just now, they go as low as $20 in the UAE. This is the price for Germany. You have nuclear. Where's nuclear? Somewhere here. Totally crazy. I mean, that's like it's like taking a Porsche and putting a horse in front of it, right? That's how smart it is to build nuclear. It just makes no economic sense. Yeah, well, solar is cheaper. Geothermal, we have new geothermal technology, which is even cheaper, $30 per megawatt hour or 3 cents per kilowatt hour. This is a wonderful slide, very encouraging, and I think we have the version of it that in 2020. So this is where we started investing, and we're now in a situation where we've broken grid parity. And there are three key concepts to understand here, because I appreciate that you're subject to an onslaught of propaganda that tells you the opposite, that tells you that I'm smoking pot, which is one of the activities I don't do too much. But this is grid parity on spot price level, right? If I can produce solar in 1 second or 1 day at 2 cents per kilowatt hour, that is not the same as producing nuclear power from a power plant base load at 3 cents all year, right? So we need to compare, first of all, spot market versus base load. So the combination of solar, wind, and batteries today in Germany is at 4 cents per kilowatt hour or $40 per megawatt hour. And with that, it's 3 times cheaper than a coal power plant. So even base load is much cheaper. In the UAE, they're now producing base load, solar plus batteries at 2 cents per kilowatt hour. Same in Colorado, same in Texas, and so forth. So when Trump came in the first time, he said, let's build coal power plants. Nobody built one. Now he says, drill, baby, drill. Nobody's going to drill. It's not going to happen. The force is with us. But the new German Minister of Economics has a point. It's not just spot market. It's not just base load. It's system cost. The renewable lobbyists like to say the sun doesn't send a bill. Our new minister says it does send a bill. Because there are times in the year when there's no wind, no sun, and it's damn cold. We call it the dark lull. And so you have to have a battery for this period. And that battery can be achieved via pump storage, pump the water up the hill, let it run down. We did that in El Hierro, the Canary Islands, westernmost Canary Island. And you can do it with green hydrogen and others. Today, we've broken grid parity for spot, baseload, and system costs. It makes no more sense to build fossil fuel. 95% of new power installations are renewable, but trust the Germans, almost like the Americans. What did the English say? I think the Americans said about the English, but we can apply it to the Germans. The Germans can always be trusted to do the right thing after trying everything wrong first. So we are now going to build 20 gigawatt of new gas power plants so we can get more money to Mr. Putin and more bombs on Ukraine. 35,000 drones financed this year alone. So unfortunately not every political battle is won, but we will work hard to win that battle. Frozen, I think. No? Are we moving? No. So we go. I must have offended someone already. Okay, now we turn to the good news, happy story. The good news is this is on the back of my office, and I learned this trick in Corona times. Every office looks the same, so everybody thinks I'm in Berlin. I'm not always in Berlin. So this is an amazing slide. This is the space needed in solar panels to power the world. Note we're cheating a little bit because we also want to catch up the others. I'm not saying energy, I'm saying power. Energy is in fact 3 times bigger. You also have to pay for electric transport and for heating. But you're looking at a centimeter across here. The EU is here. It's a complete joke, right? With 1% of the surfaces, Germany, we're fully supplied, we're totally independent. Same with France, most places on Earth. It's absolutely doable. And the most important thing is, it's not just the energy transition which I talked about so far, but the clean industrial revolution is the nexus of various revolutions that are taking place at the same time. And they reinforce each other. I mentioned you the Pope's car. The Pope's car drives him to work and back, but the 95% of the time the Pope's car is not used, it charges the grid and the grid charges it. So you can buy electricity at negative prices and you can sell it at high prices, and you can earn 3,000 euros a year with your car. So in 10 years, 30,000 euros, the car pays for itself. I can give you the key to electric car and say it's for free. And in France, once again, the leaders, Renault has come up with R5. The R5 is the first bidirectional car in Europe. Mercedes is doing the same thing. BYD is coming up with it next. Tesla is a bit behind. But basically, the transport revolution, 1 billion vehicles will move from combustion to electric cars. And they will do what? They'll provide the stability to the renewable energy sector that we're lacking. So together, we don't need as much storage anymore, because when you buy a car to go from 0 to 100 in 1.9 seconds and convince your lover that you're the hottest guy on earth, or the hottest woman on earth, then that stabilizes the grid. Then you have fintech. Right? You have people who have a little app that any Maasai warrior or any lady in Africa can use, and download themselves a app to have a solar panel leased and put on their roof. And with no time, boom, solar panels arrive and the energy transition gets accelerated. You have circular economy models where what used to be waste is now an input for your next round of production, right? Most farming systems were circular economy in the past. We've completely destroyed them with glyphosate and other horrible pesticides, all unnecessary and no longer profitable. Then you have IT systems, AI systems that really allow you to work very efficiently. We have an installation at Charles de Gaulle Airport, costs 50,000 euros to have a set of sensors like human sensors, AI enabled. They save Charles de Gaulle 1 million euros a year in cost. Unfortunately, we should have sold it, of course, at 10 million. We sold it at 50,000. But anyway, so AI helps a bit. Then agroforestry, you probably know that when the Greeks started with medicine, it was 100% about what you eat, right? Medicine is what you eat. If you ask a doctor today, what should you eat? He probably is worse educated than you. What's healthy food? You all know that sugar is the biggest drug, the biggest killer. It'd be direct sugar or sugar in bread or in alcohol and so forth. You can now have agroforestry, which is competitive, healthy, no pesticides, no plastics. We all have, 7 grams of plastic in our brains. So we live in a wonderful world where the clean industrial revolution is happening quickly, and I'm getting to the end. I wrote a few key sites here for you. I'll share the slides with you later. This one is the 27 Nobel Prize winners and 2,000 economists calling for carbon tax and dividend. Unless you price carbon properly, there will be no switch to a effective economy. But if you price carbon alone, then the people who are the poorest have the biggest damage, right? So you take the money from the tax and you give it per capita to all the citizens. On average, you have exactly enough to pay for the tax, but because 1% consumes as much as 50% of the population, 3/4 of the population gets richer. In Europe, we could be paying, thanks to CBAM, which you learned about this morning, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, we can introduce a carbon tax and dividend, which would mean that every citizen would get 200 euros a month. A family of 4 would have 800 euros a month cash. And if you then choose to cycle and eat vegetarian or whatever you want to do, you can have the cash more or less in hand at the end of the month. Switch coal shows you that 2,500 coal plants, which account for 1/4 of global emissions, can be replaced profitably today, not just on a spot market, not just on a base load, not just on a system basis, even fully written off. It's cheaper to have wind solar batteries. The Holocene project is something I think they may completely open your eyes. I hope, maybe not. Maybe you're probably even smarter than me and you know all this. I was warned this is the smartest group I could find on planet Earth. So 40 gigatons of CO2 is what Paris talked about. That's our global emissions per year. We want to bring that to 0, which is great, no more emissions. But the fact is, we've already pumped so much CO2 into the atmosphere. We went from 330 parts per million to 440 parts per million. If you want to stay alive as a species, we've got to go back to 300 parts per million. And that's 1,000 gigatons. That's no typo, 1,000 gigatons. So if we go to 0 by 2030, which we now need to do, not 2050 as Paris thought, following that, you're going to have a 10 years of 100 gigatons capture, or 20, or whatever it is, how many years you want to do, you got to take this out of the atmosphere. So we need to grow forests, we need to grow sustainable agriculture, we need to grow algae forests, we need to capture this stuff. Without that, we will not survive. Lazar, I told you about. Drawdown is a great source from America, the 100 top solutions. And Divest Invest is an organization I mentioned to you already, which tells you, put your money where your heart is. These are the drawdown solutions: onshore wind, utility-scale photovoltaics, plant-rich diets, reduced food waste, tropical reforestation, clean cooking, family planning and education, distributed solar photovoltaics, refrigerant management, alternative refrigerant, silvopasture, peatland protection, rewetting of marshland. Will get us there. It's all there. It all makes sense. It's fun. It's profitable. And you just got some cynical bastards who don't want us to happen. By the way, there's lots of you here. Margaret Mead always said, as an anthropologist from America, she said, never underestimate the power of a small group of committed, thoughtful citizens to change the course of the world. In fact, it has never been done any other way. If we decide, if we imagine, if we speak, if we act, we change this world and we want to. And lots of people have worked a lot of stuff ahead of you. Now the main message I really want to start telling you about, I've been too negative and scaring you for all this time, is that you can get fucking rich. Forget all the moral stuff, forget all of the bad things. You can just get fucking rich doing this, okay? In German we call it the Wirtschaftswunder Klima, the economic miracle climate, right? McKinsey says there's $15 trillion to be made in the net zero economy, just as big as the AI economy by 2030. If your home country, our continent, Europe, or whatever part moves first in this direction, you can get, say, a 10% share of this market, 1.5 trillion for your economy. That would mean a boost to the French or the German economy by 30%. And that would mean, hopefully, we get rid of all these negative extreme right movements which are paid for by the fossil fuel industry, because the fossil fuel industry understands that in a transparent democracy, nobody will give them subsidies. Just so you know, it is not the renewables that are receiving subsidies today. $4 trillion a year go to subsidize fossil fuels. Right? We are paying to kill ourselves. Right? I come from Berlin. I understand. We have it's called live and let live is our philosophy in Berlin. We have people who come to Berlin and they pay for pain. Right? Okay. Everybody has their own habits. But we pay 4 trillion euros to kill ourselves. It'd be really helpful if we stop that. And you know how that works, right? If someone says it would be really nice if electricity prices were low and we put a cap on electricity prices, and so we subsidize excessive fossil fuel consumption. So that's got to really stop. Yeah, and sorry, I mentioned at the beginning, the reason we speak English is the steam engine got the British to be the most powerful nation on earth, and everybody speaks English. Then the British were a bit arrogant, happens sometimes. And they didn't notice that oil and gas got cheaper and the combustion engine was cheaper, and the US and the USSR became the global superpowers. Then the internet revolution happened, and now we have the clean industrial revolution, and without doubt China has 90% of the silicon, 90% of the wafers, 90% of the solar cells and modules and wind turbines and batteries, and the most attractive electric car. The Dolphin of BYD costs 15,000 euros. 15,000 euros for a new car, fully adult grown-up car. The closest Europe has is 30,000, twice expensive. But we can do it. The English were faced with Nazi Europe. It took them 412 days to build one frigate, one battleship. Then the Americans came and said, I'm going to get shit done. And they took the fastest frigate in the British Navy to be built not in 412 days, but in how many days? Any guess?
Less than 1 day, I presume.
Almost. Got you.
1 day?
4 days, yes.
4 days.
Very close, yes. It's going to be tougher. You're really smart guys. I'm going to ask you one more tough question now. My father goes to the pool to take a free hot shower, right? I know you're all true athletes and you only take cold showers because you know the benefit. But assuming you took a 10-minute shower this morning and you love charging your mobile phone, how much less would you have to take a hot shower to charge your mobile phone once? Do you know? Or guess? Any guesses? 10-minute hot shower, charging one phone.
I guess 20 seconds.
20 seconds. Wow. Any other guesses? That's absolutely amazing, spot on.
It was an honest guess.
Amazing. So I said a minute. Most people say 2 or 3 minutes. So they get that right. So so it's actually, not spot on, close enough. Sorry, unfortunately, I have to break your heart a little bit. But it was so much better than most people. Only rocket scientists, literal rocket scientists, and physicists have gotten this right so far. But this was the closest in a long time. So it actually turns out in 1 minute, you can charge 30 mobile phones. In 10 minutes, 300 mobile phones. So it's 2 seconds. 2 seconds of hot water is enough to charge 1 mobile phone. And why didn't I know, and why don't you know? Because you don't know what the price of energy is, right? We don't price CO2, the externalities, so we don't have this in our head. My mom keeps on running after me, said, turn the light off, turn the light off. No, mom, it's totally irrelevant. Don't take the hot shower. It's also healthier for you. I think as Ayurveda will tell you, hot is very bad for you. So the industrial revolution, we can still come up on an economic miracle is possible because we've got great engineers, and the Americans did it. It took the average battleship down to 40 minutes. This is, I mentioned to you already, the 5 trillion mortgage-backed securities caused the 2008 financial crisis, which caused lots of stress in many people's life and stopped me from being a billionaire once. It's okay, come back. Where we should want to invest in the new champions of the green industrial revolution. So I don't have the beautiful slide. One slide I didn't get, but I'll get it. I'll put it in later. It's a beautiful slide of the Easter Day parade in New York on 1905. Only horses on the street. 10 years later, 1915, all of the horse carriage, except for one, turned into cars. Right? We're talking 1905. In 10 years, they changed the economy completely around. At the same time, how many members of the Dow Jones Index number 1 do you think were still in the Dow Jones Index number by 1915? You know what the like Dow Jones Index, you know, obviously. Sorry. 10%? None, close, yeah. I don't know, 10% depends on how many members there were. I don't really remember. I think there must have been 20, so 10% is actually close, that's 2. And the answer is 1. Only Western Union survived, right? So let's be absolutely clear. Nothing what you see in the stock market today is going to be worth anything in a decade, right? Because we're in a major industrial revolution where everything you knew before, doesn't work out anymore. And so the Carnegies, the JP Morgans, the Rockefellers, all these guys were not listed at the time of the last industrial revolution, and they're not listed now. So you need to find the new champions, or build the new champions, and invest in them. And I can tell you I was extremely lucky because I was 23 when I got to Russia, where everything was broken down. I could start in a new economy. And in some ways, you are exactly in the situation. You come into a system where you work for years and years and years, work up the corporate ladder, right? You're going to die doing that. It's so boring. Suck up to people and don't do it. Start your own thing and just get it done. And I think now I'm almost going to move. I could move to real business now, but you maybe guide me. I think we should go. So
10 minutes.
10 minutes. Boom. Okay, good. My new passion you asked me about is called FOAK. Not fuck something, but first of a kind factory. So why is that relevant? Most people do pre-seed investments, lots of friends and family, seed investment, lots of money, A round, B round, C round, all possible to finance. But then when you have already proven all the technology, you're already ready to go, you want to build the first factory, then the infrastructure investor says, no, too risky, unproven technology, and the venture investor says, too low returns, capex and low margin. And this is really what's about to break the neck of Europe. You may have heard of H2 Green Steel or Northvolt and other first-of-a-kind factories. They're very hard to finance. And if we get them financed, we can really make a difference because once it's running, you can then scale the rest. Here's one of our portfolio companies, NextWave. We need to invest about 90 million euros. And we then expect a licensing revenue of 1.6 billion. So it's almost like SAS software as a service, SaaS business model, right? You can explode, but at bigger scale. So this is, the European Union has seen this, and they created a fund run by the European Investment Fund called the EU Tech Champion Initiative. We want to create 10 €1 billion funds for various verticals, AI, climate tech, and so forth. And we're hoping to build one, which is sticking around the corner because I don't know how to edit the format of a slide. unfortunately. But this is supposed to say only for you, but never mind. Okay, then here are some examples of the companies we invest in that we expect to scale. The Mobility House does what I mentioned before, which is this vehicle-to-grid integration. Next Wave does solar wafers, totally cheaper. Is there a famous sausage you love? The merguez, maybe, yes? French sausage merguez. Imagine you love your sausage merguez, and the thinnest knife you find is thumb thick. Every time you cut your merguez, you lose half the sausage. Your heart would bleed, right? At least a German heart for sausage would bleed. So that is the current state of affairs for all of the super high-tech semiconductor industry of the world. For all of the solar industry. I take silicon, I grow a crystal, put it on the side, a sausage, and I cut it with diamond saws. And as I cut it, I lose half the material. Next Wave doesn't do that. It steams silicon gas onto a mother wafer, pulls it off like the protective gear on a mobile phone, and then we have 95% less material loss. These are the sensors I mentioned. This is Solar Foundry. Waste to Energy, a Swedish company that takes waste and makes green hydrogen that's competitive. Hard Hyperloop you probably heard about. You probably think it's dead, but it's not. We're going to drive next, hopefully by 2035, going to have the first Hyperloop with human beings traveling at 1,000 kilometers an hour, 1/10 the cost of energy compared to a plane. Cost of 50 euros to get from Berlin to Paris in 45 minutes. Floating offshore wind, refresh, recycles waste. So this is some of the concrete companies we invest in. This one is a favorite one that I want to invest in. You probably heard of Russian roulette, right? Two guys, one is poorer than the other, or they're both poor, and they decide, let's kill one of them, and then the one left behind is richer. So put a gun to your head, 1 in 6, right? Then you can play roulette, that's 1 in 37. Then you can do Forex day trading, that's 1 in 100. 99% of people that do day trading on Forex and so forth lose their money, or these various platforms that various people like Messi advertise. And in geothermal drilling today, we're even worse than Lotto or anything. It's only in 1% of the cases that you hit geothermal energy at the moment that's hot enough to produce power and heat. These geniuses here have come up with a plasma drill head, which allows you to go very deep to 5,000 meter depth. And if we achieve that, we don't have to pull out the drill head all the time because it gets destroyed. We can have 3/4 of the Earth covered with geothermal drilling at 3 cents per kilowatt hour, and humanity is saved just based on that. Green metallurgy comes from Iceland. This comes from Iceland, this comes from Sweden. Fun things, you can make steel cheaper than we do it now. This is our wonderful fund returns, and that's it. That's my contact details. And I thank you very much.